Thank you for your time. My name is Baytullah, and this is not food for thought. This is shooting from the hip. And today we're going to discuss subjectivity and objectivity, what they are and how they relate to everyday life and how you may be experiencing them, right? Because subjectivity is a way we experience reality, and objectivity is also a way that we experience reality or everyday life. Joining me today is my good buddy Slam.
Howdy.
Yeah, that 10-gallon hat's a dead giveaway. So anyway, getting on with the subject at hand. So why is this even important? Well, subjectivity lies at the root of our personal experiences, and so does suffering. Suffering is directly related to those personal experiences, and our subjectivity, which is we use ourself as the subject or the reference point in terms of the way we relate to all of reality around us. So we interpret things as they're occurring in everyday life, in every interaction you have, even everything you're exposed to that influences your thinking, like education, entertainment, relationships, all of it. We experience it largely through our own personal perspective, which is a subjective perspective. In that subjectivity, what you'll find is that that's where all your biases, preferences exist. Now, to be clear, having a bias or a preference isn't necessarily a problem. But this is kind of the problem with subjectivity, is that we tend to treat them as being all important, or worse, that they're more important than somebody else's subjective experience. So having said that, when you think about subjectivity, it's the way you interpret everything, and you'll always interpret it in the way that favors you and your thinking. And remember, when you stop for a moment and consider the way that each of us thinks, that we have this portion of our mind called stimulus independent thought, and it's really just a random thought generator. Most of those random thoughts are negative, right? And in that negativity, again, it's influencing the way we see ourselves. So you, the subject. So all the suffering that we experience can be traced back to the way we interpret everything, right? Does that make sense so far, what I just said? Or
Yeah.
did I lose you in that at all? Or
The only question I would have is, you said you're you. Is that the perspective of your ego, or is that...
Well, okay, you're parsing, when you start saying stuff like ego and bring that into it, it's still you, right? It's the way we're breaking down the awareness of ourselves or who we are. We compartmentalize it to try for the ease of understanding, but the reality is it's always you, right? So your ego is part of that random thought generator, and again, it's more of you have to think of it more of as a survival function. It wants you to favor you, so it's more prone to a subjective way of viewing reality. So subjective reality then becomes this thing where you are the focus of everything. When that's true, and something negative happens, that initially that painful experience is just that, it's pain. So there's no avoiding pain in life. It's an inherent part of living, right? Like pain is a natural byproduct of being here. Suffering is not. Suffering is you taking that initial insult and not letting it pass. Pain, like your emotions, like the random thought generator, is only temporary. Pain will only last for duration, and it's typically short, and then it's gone. Just like your thoughts, just like your emotions. But when you view those things subjectively, you can draw that experience out, and that's what suffering is. It's drawing out the painful experience, so that now you're reliving that painful moment over and over and over again ad nauseum, to the point where it becomes utterly distracting, right? So Does that adequately sum up subjectivity for you?
I think it makes a lot of sense because you could be stuck in the subjective view and not, which I think most people might be.
Actually, most people are. Yeah. So
And,
that's a good insight.
right, then objectivity is just a word people use, and to them it's just a word. It's not a way of seeing.
Well, that's right. So, because again, the failing is that we're never formally actually introduced to ideas of like subjectivity and objectivity. And if we are, it's only briefly and in passing. So then you never have time to really deeply consider if there are any ramifications to the, experiencing life subjectively or objectively. Now, before we get too lost, objectivity is the opposite of subjectivity, and it's the way to undo the effects of your subjective experience, right? Which you, depending on how you're going to interpret them. Because remember, not all subjective experiences are horrible, right? Like you love chocolate ice cream. So when you have chocolate ice cream, that's a subjective experience. It's a good experience. So they're not all horrible, to be clear, right? Again, you have to understand it, that almost all that stuff is a bit of a double-edged sword. So it can work for you, and it can work against you. And it's really typically on how which you obsess or focus on more, right? So again, preferences, subjectivity, bias, those are just unique reflections of you, the person that you are, right? You like chocolate ice cream, I like strawberry ice cream. Who cares? Why does it really mean anything? No, but other than it's a unique way of expressing who you are. So it would be looking at two different paintings and then not seeing that they're two different paintings, like that you decide one's of more value than the other. It's just your preference. You prefer one over the other, but one's not better than the other. They're essentially the same,
Right.
right? Like they're art, right? So that's what's important. So having preferences, again, is just an artful expression of you, your personality, your character, the individual that you are. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's healthy to have it. It's not healthy when you obsessively focus on any one thing in particular. Okay, so did I adequately explain all that, or did I lose you in any of that? Do you have any questions with regards to that?
Would it make sense to say if you got the chocolate ice cream, I got vanilla, or what you used for the example that you enjoyed?
All right.
An objective person might ignore that they didn't get what they wanted. They would say, I got ice cream."
Correct, 100% correct. And what a great way to dovetail into objectivity. So here's the significant difference, all right? So objectivity, what it allows for you to do, it allows for you to appreciate what you're experiencing at any given moment just for the sake of the experience. So you no longer dictate terms of the experience. They don't need to meet any kind of personal requirements. It's you bending with the wind. You're the willow, right? That you just follow the flow of the wind. So I'll use the ice cream example again. So it doesn't matter to you what flavor the ice cream is. You appreciate the ice cream that you're having. So for example, whatever the flavor may be, you appreciate that flavor for what it is. And that might even mean appreciating the fact that you don't particularly like it, right? So objectivity is not about liking or not liking something. Objectivity is, in the most basic way to explain it, is you are observant, right? So you're the observation. So it's another way of saying paying attention, or more colorful language would be to be in the moment, to be in the now. You hear those often used. They all essentially mean the very same thing, right? So that's why objectivity is so profound, because it gives you the ability to simply appreciate things as they are without dictating any kind of requirements on what it can and should be. So objectivity is becomes paramount in the way that we kind of interact with the world, because it gives you the freedom then to be, well, really, it gives you freedom to just experience everything, right? Without judgment, right? It doesn't mean that you can't be analytical in observation, but you don't place any value on the analysis. You're just observing. You see things for what they are. And then you treat them. So then when you act based on the observation that's objective, you act in a way that's appropriate to the circumstances of at any given moment in time, during any given experience that you may be having, right? So and that includes your subjective experience. So you can take a step outside of yourself in the middle of your subjective experience to objectively look at what am I doing? Why am I feeling this way? Like, where's the relevance to this? Why is this important? Other than, like, it made you feel something. So you can address the emotion without getting hung up on it. So subjectively, getting hung up on the emotion would stimulate random thoughts. And then remember, the majority of random thoughts that your brain tends to generate are negative. They're not pleasant, right? They're self-referential. It's about you, and it's not usually in a positive light. Objectivity, you're not even in the picture. It just asks what's going on. So suddenly you're having a feeling, you address the feeling. It's not your feeling, it's the feeling. And then the next logical question you would evolve to would be maybe why? Why am I feeling this? And at the moment that you address it, you take away the power or the potency of whatever it is that you're feeling or experiencing and stuff. And then it gives you that ability to interpret things freely and to act. This is the real difference between subjectivity and objectivity. Subjectivity produces reactions out of people, and they're not well thought out. But objectivity allows for you to pause and choose an action. And then typically it would be the most appropriate action. It's not a guarantee of it, but typically that's what it will allow. Because if you take that pause for a moment and consider what you're doing, you'll act in a radically different way than you would if you just had a knee-jerk reaction to something. Make sense?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting the way you said it, because once you're subjective, it's a loop. You're reactive and reactive and reactive. Objectivity gives you more freedom where you can still appreciate the subjective experience.
100%. That's completely accurate. That's exactly what we're talking about. And so now, do you see the real value then in training for objectivity, or to try and foster an objective state of mind, right? And why it's so important. I like to refer to it as critical objective thinking. Actually, the phrase I like to use is renegade, humanist, individualist, critical objective thinker. Okay, it's a long term to unpack. Watch some of the other videos. Essentially, all it means is that since we're kind of moving into critical thinking is what lawyers do. So when you're critical of something, you're dissecting it and stuff. And usually, when it's done subjectively, you're almost always doing it to favor your bias. So think of lawyers, right? Because they're masters of critical thinking, right? They're masters of rhetoric. That's what they do, right? So that doesn't make them right. They're just arguing in support of their position. But when you're a critical objective thinker, you're analytical, but you're not attached to the analysis. You don't have a dog in the fight. You don't care what the outcome is. You just want to see what the observable facts are and then weigh in on them or use those to inform your decisions, whatever they may be. Okay, is that, again, did I lose you anywhere in there? Does that seem, did I explain that in a way that it was easy for you to wrap your head around, or was that confusing?
I think it makes sense in terms of critical thinking as a subjective perspective and an objective perspective. Because critical thinking can be used either way, but a critical subjective point of view always has the dog in the fight, like you
That's
said.
right.
And in that sense, if you have a bias, um, you're reacting. Like your body's trying to find the best way to get what you want, but the thing you want and the best way to get what you want might not actually be the objective truth you want to uphold.
Or the best thing that you could do, right? So that's another thing. Subjectivity can lead you to make poor decisions and then poor actions by extension of that poor thinking, right? So then because it'll always be self-interested, so you'll be like, it's their fault, right? It'll start assigning blame. You'll rationalize anything that you do to satisfy this subjective kind of way of viewing whatever experience you're having and whatever encounter you're going through. Whereas objectively, what you'll do is you'll actually stand back. You'll broaden the perspective because you'll want to have a better view of everything, and then as a result of that better view, then you're able to make better decisions. And again, it's not a guarantee. All it does is it gives you the ability then to choose, dare I say, wisely, right?
Yeah,
Right?
that makes a lot of sense. I just want to cut in. We're at 16-minute mark, but I really like. Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say.
It's
Go for
okay.
it.
No.
But yeah, 60 minutes.
Okay, all right. So I think we'll start summing this up. We're not closing, and not completely closing just yet. If that question, if you can recall that, just jump in at any time that it comes back to your mind, and we'll address that. Right. So now this, what's really important is then is not just your personal ability to differentiate between, like, are you viewing things subjectively or objectively, but how do you prepare to be objective? I'm glad that you asked. Let me tell you. So being objective is a way that you can train your nervous system to respond. And how do you train the nervous system? You train it to pay attention. So typically the methods available for that are things like breath work, yoga, meditation, the martial arts, believe it or not, because if particularly those that use katas and stuff like that, because you're following these pre-subscribed kind of actions. And when you completely focused on the action and stuff like that, you're cultivating this part of the nervous system that you're training it to pay attention, that's being objective. You're just paying attention. You're observing what is going on. So in the experience, then you experience the fullness and the richness of the experience, while training to be present in the experience, right? So that's why objectivity is important. That's how you can train for it. And remember, what it does do, it also quiets that portion of the mind that feeds really into your subjectivity. So that stimulus-independent thought, the random thought generator, it actually changes the nature of your relationship with it, because it doesn't actually go away. What happens as a result of the training is that you see it, and then you're able to just move on past whatever it does. So it has the freedom to continue doing what it does, but it becomes, like I say, more quiet. It doesn't, because it's not overriding everything. Now, having said that, the same thing happens in reverse. So if you get so caught up in your self-interest, your ego, your subjective view, your biases and your preferences, you're training your nervous system to favor that. So it'll make you more efficient at being that, right? So remember how we started the conversation. It prolongs suffering. So then you're training your nervous system to become better at making you suffer. Now, here's the question. Is that what you really want? You really want to be just this panic button that's ready to go off at the moment that you experience a trigger of any kind? Or do you want to be somebody who's able to pause and take the moment and reflect and then make a decision that might be unilaterally beneficial for everybody concerned at any given moment in time? So you tell me, which has more value?
I feel like it's obvious.
Okay.
I don't remember my question, but I remember what elicited the question.
Okay.
I was thinking about how you've been doing meditation for me, a very, very long time.
Yeah, I started in 2009.
Yeah, that's a long time for me, in my opinion. But one thing I noticed is impulsive or intrusive thoughts that tend to benefit the random thought generator, like the subjective, or the thing that feeds in your subjective experience.
Right.
That seems detrimental to like yogis or masters of any skill, because having the direct observation and flow into the work and like being present, um, they don't have time to put in the subjective experience. Like if you practice a kata,
Well, I understand. I understand where you're going with that. The difference is it's because they're. If there's a difference, it's because their focus is objectivity, and then training in objectivity, you unintentionally end up quieting subjectivity. So it's not like they're going out of their way to do these things to quiet the subjective mind. It's just a byproduct of the things that they're doing. So that's really important. So the things that you do to a degree dictate who you are. So if these experts or these sages or these really brilliant and wise individuals who are masters of some kind of discipline, they take their time and invest it in the discipline. And the byproduct is the freedom from the more negative aspects of self. They're not coming at it going, well, I'm going to free myself from that dark part of me. That's not the focus, right? So intention becomes everything. So your intention is just to realize the full potential of what you can do, say, as a result of learning to pay attention, right? And then it frees you unintentionally. I guess it's directly related, so it's not that unintentional. It just frees you from that subjectivity. But remember, if you only ever act on impulse, everything's about what you want, and you only see the world through self-interested eyes and how things relate to you, it's quieting the objective abilities that you have. You're quieting them, and you're favoring the subjective view, and then that's where all your pain and suffering is. So can I get a quick time check?
yeah, it's 2:22 or 22 minutes in. I mean,
Okay, I'm
sorry,
thinking.
can I
Yeah,
ask?
sure.
I like how you say that there's byproducts to like focusing on subjectivity. Like you didn't say that explicitly, but like
It's implied, right? Like
yeah,
if it becomes a focus, then what you're doing is you're taking away from your objectivity. If you're nourishing subjectivity, it's at the expense of objectivity.
but learning to pay attention like grants you not as a byproduct, like but almost directly, like you get patience out of that, and out
That's
of
correct,
patience, you're
100%.
also efficient. You choose your moments, like you're able to
Right.
hold your questions,
Okay, you
which I have
get.
a hard time doing.
Okay, but you get it. Clearly, you get it.
Yeah, and it's practice.
Okay, so now you see the value then of finding a method of training, applying the methodology, and then actually do the training. You got to show up. But and here's the weird thing, it's just a question of time. So if you regularly and consistently show up and do what you need to do, eventually it'll lead there. Now, in terms of duration, how long it takes, that's different from person to person. That's something we're going to dive more deeply into when we get into the podcast Bet on It. There we'll dissect meditation and breath work, and we'll look at some of the other methods like Tai Chi and yoga and stuff like that, and again, how they work. But all of them ultimately do contribute to you becoming more objective in the way that you view reality, right? And your objective experience. So, any other questions?
Just by sitting at a desk and looking at a blank page, if you're a writer, that's part of the training. Not even doing the work, but being able to ignore the random thoughts that tell you, don't sit at that desk, go eat a sandwich.
You know what? I never considered that, but that's 100% true. But then it's like any discipline. Look, when you look at the martial arts in China, Kung Fu means hard work. It translates directly as hard work. It doesn't mean martial arts. As a result of doing hard work, where you're focused on the work that you're doing, you end up developing an unusual proficiency, right? So that's the point. So it doesn't matter what the skill is. And meditation, what you're doing in that practice is you're meant to carry that over to everything else you do. So it's not just about like that 20 minutes that you commit a day or whatever your regime is. It's about what you take from the practice and how you apply it in your everyday real life. That's the real value, right? And it's a long road. It's a long road, but it's entirely worth all the effort you'll put into it. But then again, that's only you can determine that. Not because I say so. You shouldn't believe a damn word I'm saying. You should invest in yourself, see if there's any truth in any of what I'm saying, and then come to the conclusions on your own. Right? That's where there's real value in all of this. It's not gurus. You don't need a guru. You don't need a leader. You just need to do the work. Right? You don't need to be a sycophant and suck up to somebody to thinking that somehow, because that's what somebody who's subjective would do, they'll gain favor. You don't need favor. You just need to do the work. So if you're not afraid to do the work, you commit to the work, the outcome is that it leads to you. Right? It leads to you. I think that's a perfect note to close on, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's great. We're at 26 minutes in. Can I add something?
Sure, please do. We're not completely closed out, but go ahead. What do you?
When you say it leads to you, like we're all individuals. We're all the you. We're all the I. Like this sense of like
that becomes another deep conversation in its own. But go on.
Right. So following someone who you idolize, it's good to have heroes. Like some people have done incredible things. Like Canada, Terry Fox is a huge household name. Everybody could do what he did, given enough practice and patience.
Well, he just gave of himself, and I mean that's something that all of us can do. All of us can learn to do that. And here's the thing with objectivity, to close this out. Objectivity feeds into you being more compassionate, to relating more to other people. Because when you're paying attention, you don't see the difference between yourself and the person sitting at the opposite end of the table. All you see is you. So to say that it leads to you, paying attention or objectivity leads to you, it really does lead to you. And if we're all just extensions of one another, then it leads to everyone, right? So this is what you can do, and by doing it, then you realize your connection more fully and more completely with everyone else that's here, right? Having an experience at the same time that you're having this experience. So is that about do it? I think that about does it. Okay, in closing, I'd like to say, question everything, including yourself, especially yourself, right? Thank you for your time.